Let me welcome back to Canada for his fifth presentation on webinars, Dr. Micah Sadigh, PhD, whose very short bio is the following. I'm not going to read all 27 pages, just the following. Dr. Micah Sadigh is a professor of psychology at Cedar Crest College in Pennsylvania, United States. He's a graduate of Moravian College and the Lehigh University. He's a diplomate in the Franklian Psychology and Existential Analysis. Dr. Sadigh is also a fellow of the International College of Psychosomatic Medicine. He was the recipient of the Cedar Crest College Faculty Award for Excellence in Teaching in 2009. He's the author of 5 books, including an internationally recognized book on the treatment of chronic pain and stress-related disorders. And we have had him speak to us in person twice in Canada, and now for the 5th time via our webinars. His topic tonight is autogenic training, a psychophysiological approach to sleep restoration. Welcome back, Dr. Sadigh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosen. It's a special treat to be back. I have had such a wonderful time giving and preparing and giving these talks to the members of the Academy. It's truly a pleasure to be back. I miss seeing you in person, and those 2 times that I was in Canada, those times were very, very special. I hope one day in the future we'll be back together so I can shake your hands and have a glass of wine with you, which we can't do tonight, apparently. I have a special presentation for you that it's going actually to pull together a lot of the concepts and ideas that I have talked about in those previous talks. The purpose of this talk is basically emphasize one critical concept, which I will explicate throughout the talk. And the concept is that the body is a self-repairing mechanism. And one of the critical times when the body is actually profoundly is engaged in repair is actually during sleep. So if we interfere with sleep and affect its quality and quantity, in a true sense, we are interfering with the body's capability to initiate repair. I'd like to make a promise, and I was really hoping to do this for you last night. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I had another very long day, but within the next few days, hopefully by this weekend, I will make a little MP3 file for you that I would be honored to share with members of the Academy, particularly those who are here tonight, which will demonstrate the technique that I will be talking about. My focus is not going to be as much on the technique. I'll go over it with you, but I'm going to talk in more depth about how the body actually engages in a repair process. So it's very important for you who work with patients who have sleep disorders. So it's important to know about different forms of relaxation exercises. Except tonight, I'm going to ask you to replace the word relaxation with restoration or replenishment. I won't have the time to clearly demonstrate this, but the term relaxation is actually not a physiological term. There is no such thing as relaxation in the human body. Every cell moves from a catabolic state to an anabolic state, but the cell never sits there. It seems like it's sitting there sometimes, but it's engaged in protein synthesis, for example, preparing itself for cell division. So this is so important for you to think in these terms from this point on, because if I say to you, I want you to relax, one of the first things you may say to me is I don't have time to relax. But if I use the term, let's put aside time to restore you or to replenish your resources, those terms make a lot more sense. In fact, they're much more accurate. Relaxation sounds like an idle time, that nothing is happening. That's not how the body actually functions. So there goes the word relaxation. Think in terms of restoration and replenishment. And I will demonstrate this a couple of times tonight. So introduce different methods of restoration and replenishment to your patients, knowing that, emphasizing that probably one of the most profound periods of restoration is actually during sleep, specific stages of sleep. Start with the question of how does the body repair itself? We take this for granted that the body somehow you cut yourself while you're shaving, or injure yourself somehow, and the body somehow fixes it. Platelets, and we can talk about its immune system and various cells getting involved in that process. But this is it's truly a profound question. How does the body, how does it recognize that something is broken or is damaged, or it's not being properly regulated? And how does it go about repairing those systems? So please keep that in the back of your mind. It is unbelievably beautiful. It's sublime in some ways. It looks mechanical, but what makes it sublime and beautiful is that it's very much like a concert. It's a collaboration of multiple systems in order to bring about that healing. So this was a question that was the simple question that has been asked for thousands of years, actually, was the focus of a neurologist by name of Dr. Oscar Vogt. Dr. Vogt and his wife, Cecile Vogt, in Germany, began exploring this question based on the knowledge that they had at the end of the 19th century. So we were talking about the beginning of the 20th century. They did all sorts of experiments, measured different things. And instead of delving into all the experiments and their findings, I'm going to just summarize decades of work that they had conducted. And these are the conclusions. So please note, this is the beginning of the 20th century. Today, this will be, oh, gee, we know this. But back then, that was not the case. That it's a mistake to think about the mind and the body as two separate systems, that they're really one system. Mind body is actually a single system. So dichotomizing them is actually a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Whenever you're engaged with your patients, you are working with their bodies and their minds, and both can interfere with your procedures, your interventions, or both can collaborate with you. Highly anxious person, for example, will not heal as quickly or as effectively as someone who has lower anxiety level. It's not something in their head. It's the anxiety has a pretty profound physiology. The second conclusion was that the body-mind is actually a self-repairing mechanism. It's a system that knows when to initiate repair, how to initiate repair. And as long as the damage is not massive, if you leave it alone, it will actually repair itself. If the damage is massive and you have to do surgery and move things around and repair things, etc., as soon as that kind of intervention is over, then the body and mind take over and initiate repair. And the third conclusion was that the most profound state of repair actually is during sleep. And I just want to emphasize here, this is the early parts of the 20th century. Hans Berger came up with the EEG machine, electroencephalogram, in 1929. So we couldn't really see the electrical activity of the brain before that time, nor did we know that there were different stages of sleep. So they were actually surmising incredible findings that there are actually different stages to sleep. So please remember, one function of sleep is restoration, is repair. Particularly when it comes to physical repair, particularly the slow wave sleep, the non-REM side of sleep. They also concluded that you can initiate a kind of repair, very much like the kind of repair that takes place during sleep, when you're in a profound state of rest, like a quiet state of rest and restoration. I'm not going to use the word relaxation. So this was a revolutionary idea. What they were talking about was incredibly new and exciting, but the only reason they got some mileage out of this was because they were conducting really good research. There was a lot of good systematic research going on. Let me tell you what they were fighting against, which you are fighting against as well, without perhaps knowing it. What they were fighting against was the biomedical model, which had come about in the earlier part of the 19th century. And if I could summarize this, with all respect, all of you, your training was within this model. This is the model that was used in your training. And to this day, it's kind of affects our thinking, our conclusions about certain things. If I could quickly summarize it, it basically says we are sophisticated machines. That's what basically the biomedical model is about. You're very complex, fascinating looking machines. That's it. And machines break down. Machines develop problems. Like your car could develop a problem, and you take it to a mechanic, and they fix it, and then it's back running. Hopefully, so that's it. Things break down, and also, at one point the damage is so extensive that people die. So nothing mysterious about it. What I'm trying to say is that this model suggests that our thoughts, emotions, our relationship, none of those things have anything to do with the proper functioning of the body. They just throw them out of the window. They're actually meaningless. We just learn about the machine. So this is when medical schools started emphasizing chemistry, organic chemistry, cell physiology. These things became incredibly central to, and physiology, cell physiology especially. Every cell comes from a cell. Cells form tissue, and tissues form organs, etc. It's very elaborate mechanical. So keep that in mind. This is the model, the prevailing model. And one of the people who contributed, one of the great minds that contributed to this model was, to the unfolding of this model, was Louis Pasteur. And Pasteur, not a physician, not a biologist, a chemist, had come to the conclusion, I was able to demonstrate that disease is caused by microorganisms. To this day, we owe so much to Louis Pasteur, who was ridiculed at one point that tiny organisms can kill people. So one of our vaccines, one form of vaccine we use to this day, where it comes from his research. So that's it. This disease is caused by microorganisms. Bring microorganisms under control. Suddenly, doctors are wearing white instead of orange, which was the main attire of doctors back then. They're white, sterile, free of germs, using sanitation, proper sanitation, sterilizing, vaccination, etc., became part and parcel of medicine. One of Claude Bernard's contemporaries, a great figure in experimental medicine, was Claude Bernard. And this is quite profound. I think this should be on our news feeds and on our newspapers. So this is what Claude Bernard had said. So he's living at the same time that Pasteur was living. Disease is more than the presence of microorganisms. For disease to grow, the terrain of the body must be prepared, meaning that if I were to place a bunch of seeds on this piece of paper and come back a year from now, you won't see a plant. For these seeds to germinate, there must be a proper environment, proper condition. Proper soil has to be there, water, moisture at least, and sunshine, etc. Those environmental factors make a difference. So Pasteur had spent many years trying to support his point of view. So when Claude Bernard is making this statement, he's ridiculed because this doesn't even make sense. So no, if there's microorganism, you're going to get sick, period. Actually, Pasteur had come to the conclusion toward the end of his life that that's actually not the case, because some animals were getting sick, some didn't. They were inoculated with the same exact pathogen. Why is it not working? So please, these are Pasteur's last words as he's dying. And I have it in French for you. So if you speak French, please read it in French. Bernard was right. So the end of your life, instead of saying, honey, I'm sorry, or Father, forgive me. No, Bernard was right. The germ is nothing. The soil is everything. Again, extreme, because both the soil and the germ are important. But what he was discovering was, if the body's mechanisms have become derailed and they're not functioning properly, that's when disease takes over. So why is it that some people are infected and do relatively well? Yes, they're still sick, and some get very ill very quickly. The terrain of the body is prepared. The soil has been prepared for some of it. Let me just fast forward. I don't have a slide for it, but about 40, 50 years after these statements were spoken, Hans Selye, an Austrian physician who moved to Canada, to your beautiful country, and he stayed there, the father of stress research, was actually able to demonstrate this exact statements. He inoculated 2 groups of rats, same exact influenza virus intranasal inoculation. One group of rats were in a quiet place, dark and quiet. Rats liked it there, good temperature. The other group, noisy environment, bright lights. One gets sick and they die. The other group, they get sick, but they recover very rather quickly. So it's not just the germ; it's the germ plus preparing the terrain of the body. I hope this makes sense. I hope you think about this right now. Our world is so, and I don't want to misuse the word, so quote stressed out, that it's more vulnerable to the potential damaging effects of the pandemic. So not just the germ, but the germ plus the soil to keep in mind. So the question that I'm going to answer is, what helps keep the soil not resistant to disease? And how does the body engage in activities that help it survive if it's invaded, or it's been attacked by, let's say, some kind of germ or an illness of any sort? So the biomedical model excluded anything to do with the mind, thoughts, emotions, etc. No room for it. You don't talk to your car. And how do you feel today? Am I driving you too fast, too slow? You don't talk to your car like that. Was something very unusual happening in Europe. This is toward the end of the 19th century. By the end of the 19th century, neurology was growing quite rapidly. We knew a lot more about the nervous system than we knew decades earlier. And there was a very strange condition appearing in Europe, different parts of Europe. and nobody could explain it. And this was a condition in which people would go blind, suddenly would go blind, or they would have no sensation in parts of their bodies, like no sensation from your wrist to your fingers. That's impossible. Right? And they have sensation going back to their neck, sensation, and then nothing from wrist up. That's impossible. There are two nerves going to your hands, so and both seem to be intact over here. Why can't you feel it? Sudden blindness, paralysis, fainting, etc. I'm talking to you, I'm looking at you, and suddenly I go completely blind. You put a bright light in front of me. I can't see a thing. The next day, my vision is back, or 5 days later, my vision is back. This was baffling the physicians of Europe. Throughout Europe, was this, what is this called? For lack of a better term, unfortunately so, the term hysteria was used to describe this baffling neurologic condition. By the way, if you think what I'm describing to you is a 19th century phenomenon, please think again. It's called conversion disorder. You still see it, especially in people with our soldiers, for example, who have come back from these wars, have conversion disorder or functional neurologic disorder. Structure is intact, but function is broken. It's something that is interfering with function. So the person who is dying to figure out, what this is all about was actually Freud. He was trained as a neurologist. Did not want to practice neurology. Did not want to be with people. He wanted to work in a laboratory. But one of his mentors says, go and get a job at the hospital. You're an MD. Come on, you're a neurologist. Go help people. So he comes across this condition called hysteria, and he can't figure out where it comes from, etc. And he's told by one of his fellow physicians that there is a physician in France by name of Jean Charcot who uses hypnosis to help people who have hysteria. He goes to France, learns hypnosis, comes back, practices hypnosis. It works for a short while. You hypnotize me, I have lost my vision. You hypnotize me, and through hypnosis, my vision comes back. But after a while, people's symptoms would come back. The symptoms would return, but they were becoming more resistant to hypnosis and its therapeutic properties. His friend, and at one point mentor, Joseph Breuer, had suggested, and please keep this in mind, he had suggested that perhaps the thing that's interfering with these proper functions of the body has an emotional basis. Remember, medicine is saying emotions have nothing to do. So it has an emotional basis, and if we could somehow get to these emotions and release them somehow, get these emotions out, symptoms will disappear. And lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what happened. They begin to develop a technique to get people to actually focus on emotions, and neurologic symptoms such as paralysis in hands, legs, etc., begin to disappear once they tap into these emotions. And the whole thing was captured in this book, Studien über Hysterie, studies on hysteria, where they describe their technique. So why did I go through this? And it's important, it's so important for me to go through that because it shows you that the biomedical model is incomplete. That whenever you're working with your patients, you're staring at their teeth and their jaw and their different muscles, etc. You are also dealing with their emotions, and those emotions do indeed affect the presentation of different symptoms, and also your ability to help them. Freud's develops two theories. One is that sometimes we are exposed to traumatic, disturbing events, and think about those events as like poison, but not physical poison, chemical poison, but emotional poison. And these emotions get trapped inside of us. The key is to get people to talk them out. That's called the cathartic technique, and kind of comes from Greek katharos, get out the dirt. The other technique that he develops is that to re-educate people. So let's say I touch something and I don't remember it. It's been buried in my unconscious. I touched something that it was wrong or it was inappropriate, or I'll be punished for touching something of that sort. So one way of disconnecting from this hand, because it's connected to a bad act, is to go numb in this hand. I saw something that was inappropriate. Our soldiers will tell you that they saw bad things happening, and then they develop conversion disorders during which you go completely blind. It's real, it exists to this day. So, or you need to re-educate people. That was when you were a child, that was that situation, etc. Re-educating the mind helps to control these symptoms. The message of this slide is that you and I have an unconscious mind. We are not just conscious being with our accolades and degrees, and so we're actually primarily driven by an unconscious aspect of ourself. And that unconscious could be carrying burdens or struggling with things that could interfere with our proper healing and functioning. So when does the body tap into those unconscious struggles and works with them? Do we need a therapist? Do we need an analyst? Every time those kinds of struggles exist. And what is beautiful about the entire field of autogenic training, which was my doctoral dissertation, which was the technique that I used when I was doing clinical work, was that it actually suggests that both psychological and physical repair, self-regulation, actually are self-initiated. And if you remove those things that interfere with the body's repair process, they can actually be repaired and rectified. So he collaborated with a number of physicians and doctors from different fields. But again and again, they were coming to the conclusion that sleep plays a significant role. So they came up with a form of auto-hypnosis using hypnotic techniques to see if they can activate this natural phenomenon, this self-generated repair phenomenon. They used hypnosis initially, but after a while, they abandoned hypnosis because they learned that the process doesn't really, you don't need hypnosis to initiate it. You need to work with nature. You need to work with the way the body knows how to repair itself. So, and I'll explain that. That sounds mysterious. Then they came up with the term autogenic. Autos, self, genos, generated. Self-generated state. Self-generated what? Self-generated repair. So, let me pause here. Let's stay with humans. The human body has the capability, and you have experienced it throughout your life, to repair itself, to bring about self-regulation. You're doing it right now as you're listening to me. You'll be doing it tonight, and because of that self-repair, we go on living and repairing different organs, etc. But the repair is not limited to physical conditions. It is actually affects everything in the body. That's the process of repair. This was the beauty of the autogenic research, which again, as I said, started in the early part of the 20th century. And in parts of Europe, still a part of medical education. I've met the person who wrote the forward to my book, the third edition of my book on autogenic training. Dr. Hugo Twaddle was trained in medicine in France. And the way we met was at a medical function, and I mentioned autogenic, and he ran from the other side of the room and says, "Who said autogenic?" And we met, and he said that he took a course in autogenic training when he was medical school in France, in Germany as well, Japan as well. Canada became actually the home of autogenic training, believe it or not, for many, many decades. Dr. Luta, one of the followers of the founder of this approach, actually moved to Canada. He was also a physician. So these are his words. And please read this slowly. I keep it on the screen. One of the most important assumptions of autogenic training, self-generated repair, is that nature has provided humans, it says man, I just corrected the language there, with homeostatic mechanisms of balance, not only to regulate fluids and electrolyte balance, blood pressure, heart rate, wound healing, and so on. Please note, but also to readjust to more complicated, functional, not structural, such as emotions interfering with proper function, of psychophysiological nature, mind, body, nature. Homeostatic self-regulation basically is used to say that when we are exposed to excessive disturbing stimulation, such as doctors today, maybe we're standing there, sitting there, working with the patients, examining their different muscles, their jaw, their teeth, etc., sitting there perhaps for hours. That excessive stimulation has built up a kind of physical stress on your body, or the stress could be emotional. The body has a capability to discharge, release this disturbing load that has picked up. I'm talking about physical load. My arm is tired. I'm so tired, but I had to hold the instruments like this for an hour. Or I was exposed to a very upsetting situation today where I had to talk to patients, and they were crying, they were upset, etc. All those excessive stimuli have to go somewhere. They are in your nervous system. Stimulation is processed through the nervous system. And you have flashbacks to perhaps the conversation you had with a patient, or your muscles are tight from standing there or sitting there manipulating some instrument. Where does this excess stimulation, where does it go? Well, it just goes away. At the end of the day, it just goes. No, it doesn't. It does not. It doesn't work that way. So what are the mechanisms that bring back those muscles into a state of balance to promote regulation? Well, it happens when we shift, let's say, from a sympathetic state into a parasympathetic state. And when do we feel some of those shifts? When do we experience some of those shifts? During sleep. Sleep actually restores those proper function and releases excess stimulation. Excess like stimulation, like too much tension, too much exposure to bright lights, to disturbing situation, which is called neutralization. I do want, if I were to stop here, I just want you to remember this. One function of sleep is to neutralize excessive stimulation that the nervous system has picked up throughout the day. And that is so true. You can actually see the changes in muscle physiology during different stages of sleep. I'll get to that in just a moment. At the mental level, some of the self-regulatory neutralization or recuperation occurs naturally during sleep and dreams. So they concluded that actually dreams are a form of discharge, this excessive discharge of tension that was building up within the nervous system. This sounds revolutionary, it's incredible, but actually 2,000 years earlier, Aristotle had actually suggested that dreams are a way of releasing excessive stimulation that was building up in the nervous system. And they were supporting it with their research. So the technique of autogenic training it was ultimately to promote this healing process, which means facilitate. Instead of waiting until you fall asleep, hopefully you get a good night's sleep. Can we recreate, replicate somehow those healing properties? This comes from much later research, relatively speaking, by Dr. Lute and his colleagues, published in 1965. So what I'd like you to do is to look at those three circles on top, or ovals on top. So on one end, all the way to the left, you see sleep, when you're sound asleep. All the way to the right, wakefulness. And as we move from a wakeful, like being fully awake, to being fully asleep, as we move from one state to the other, we traverse through this middle ground, which they refer to as the autogenic state. So when you are, quote, when you're, quote, relaxing, or you're calming yourself and you're resting there watching your favorite team win, sorry, baseball or soccer, or whatever your favorite sport is, as you're sitting there and relaxing, maybe, hopefully relaxing, certain physiological changes begin to occur, especially as you become very drowsy. So somewhere, look at the circles below, somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, as you can see there, you become somewhat drowsy, or maybe closing your eyes a little bit. Then there's this specific stage called the autogenic state, and then followed by drowsy, and you're sound asleep. So almost 100 years of research was based on what happens during this autogenic state, and how can you facilitate it without having people fall asleep? Can you do this during the day? Can you enter this autogenic state during the day at will, etc.? So please remember this. Since birth, every night that you've slept, you have gone through the autogenic state. It happens every single night. Quick answer to the question, why does the body need to replenish itself as it goes towards sleep? Because most of sleep is actually a lot of work. It's like a refueling station here. Specific things begin to occur in this autogenic state, and I can teach you how to recreate this. It's again, as I mentioned, it's taught in medical schools in Europe. I've written 3 books about it. I can teach you this, and you can teach your patients about it. But I want you to just appreciate that your body literally enters this stage every night. What if we were to extend this, to stretch it out? Can we gain some benefits from it? So, first thing I'd like to demystify is that autogenic training is not a form of auto-hypnosis. It has nothing to do with hypnosis. Hypnosis is an alert state in which you're suggestive. Autogenic training also is not a relaxation technique, as you're not idly relaxing. You're actually doing repair. No one can tell me that when you're in a parasympathetic state, you're just relaxing. None of these suggest relaxation. All of these suggest an anabolic state. It's some kind of a building up of resources, whereas the sympathetic is using up resources. So the body shifts back and forth. The autogenic state helps us move toward the parasympathetic anabolic state, restorative state of repair. Please note that during much of sleep, we shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic, except, and please remember this, except during REM sleep. In REM, we are back here in the sympathetic state. So keep that in mind. And I honestly think you should get into the habit of asking your patients, do you dream a lot? They may say, I don't remember my dreams, but do you dream a lot? And if the patient says yes, I assure you, the next thing you can ask is, do you wake up tired or refreshed? Always tired, doc. Why? Because they were dreaming too much REM, spending too much in that sympathetic state, utilizing a lot of their energies and resources. So we make this shift. So it's not relaxation, idle thing. It's shifting into a repair and restoration state. The autogenic phenomenon. So what is autogenic? Self-generated repair, which you have entered every single night of your life, as have I. When we take naps, I don't like to take naps. But if you were to take naps, you go through this between wakefulness and sleep. You're doing that continuum. Certain physiological things begin to happen, which suggests some form of repair or restoration. Autogenic self-repair, self-generated repair, self-generated, not medication generated, self-generated repair. So I would love for you to transport yourself to this part of the world. Just right now, if you could find a way to come here and walk down this hallway with me and go to my lab, and I will hook you up to a number of physiological devices, and we can measure, let's say, 3 things we'll measure very simply. I'll measure muscle tension using an electromyogram on your muscles of your forearm. I will use a thermistor to measure temperature of your fingers, the peripheral temperature, and I will hook you up to an just very simple electrocardiogram, so I can look at your heart. And what we will see is that we'll ask you to fall asleep, to get comfortable and help you fall asleep. You'll notice the following will happen: that as you become more and more relaxed, moving toward that autogenic state, your muscles become relaxed. The tension in your muscles of your forearm particularly begin to drop. So a sensation of heaviness will ensue as the muscles are becoming relaxed. Second, your hand temperature will go up. Third, your cardiac activity becomes nice and rhythmic. Fourth, your I don't have any equipment for this one, but your breathing becomes deeper, more diaphragmatic. Fifth, the warmth in the upper abdominal area, solar plexus in your spine area, that area begins to warm up. And then the 6th stage is when your forehead gets cooler, you're asleep. You're getting very close to falling asleep. And you fall asleep. So every single night, you can actually do this and watch people go from sensation of heaviness in their arms, warmth in their extremities, to cooling of the forehead. Can we teach people to relax their forearms and legs, etc., relax their muscles, increase blood flow to their extremities? Yes, that's what autogenic exercises are actually about. And the 3rd edition of my book had just come out when I was with you. Lovely time I had with you the last time I was in Toronto. And I gave Dr. Rawson a copy of it. I even wrote a comment in there for him, great president of our academy. So he has a copy, and you are not allowed to buy it. If you are interested in it, you have to just send me an email, and I'll gladly get you a copy from my publisher. That's no problem at all. So when we go from actively participating in life, moving around, etc., to falling asleep, that shift in German is called the Umschaltung. And it's almost like, think of it as a mechanism in the brain that says, let's shift you from activity to repair. Umschaltung. What's the function of autogenic state? Normalization and neutralization. You have built up a lot of tension. As you're about to fall asleep, let's say you were holding some of your instruments like this the whole day, You're making a fist as you're falling asleep. And you can't observe this. You can ask your spouse, your partner, someone to watch you. And as you're falling asleep, in subtle ways, you let go of that. And sometimes there's a jump, sometimes like a myoclonic jerk, but the hand goes into its normal position. So neutralizing, heart rate has been up the whole day, fluids have been dysregulated, regulating, putting them back to where they belong. Autogenic state is not a meditative state. I'm proud of you if you know how to meditate. I'm not a meditator myself. Doesn't work for me. It is not a meditative state because meditative state often focuses more on quieting the mind. Physiology comes later. It is not a relaxation technique. It's never a waste of time just relaxing muscle. It's activating the body's own physiological repair mechanism. Forgive me for repeating this, but I do need to say the body knows how to repair itself. We need to remove those things that interfere with its repair process. And who said that? I paraphrased it. Hippocrates actually said. Just have to remove those things that interfere with the body's repair state. So I had a grant. This was right after I was out of graduate school, and I had this. I had access. I was doing research with pain patient, and I had access to brain mapping equipment. So I got a small grant, and I was very lucky to receive the grant. And the grant was to investigate the effects of different forms of techniques on electrocortical activity, different states of mind, different brain activity. And it was unbelievably disappointing as people would come and practice different techniques and smell different, spray different essential oils on their body, and which was supposed to induce some shift in their state. None of those things work. None of them. None. People listening to certain kind of music and saying it has a relaxing effect, etc. The only time that I actually saw a shift in brain pattern activity, which was quite impressive, was a gentleman who had been practicing transcendental meditation for a period of time. And this is actually, this you're looking at is the baseline with his eyes closed. In the back of the brain, the blue suggests alpha waves, which is very common. If you were to close your eyes, please don't close your. If you were to close your eyes, you will see an increase in alpha waves in the back of the cortical region, and we see an increase in theta waves in the frontal, moving to its central area of the brain. So this is a very common. All of us will produce something similar to this. So we have a baseline, and then I asked this gentleman, whose name I even remember to this day because this was so unbelievably impressive what I saw. Then I asked him to practice his transcendental meditation to see if that technique actually did anything to the brain. And this is what happened. Transcendental meditation, within minutes, his brain began producing more alpha waves, very focused alpha waves, 10 cycles, 10 hertz. And the next thing was the two hemispheres became synchronized. Very profound state of meditative state, very, very impressive. And then I asked him to stop practicing, see where his brain went, and he went back to baseline. So clearly he could initiate this. Reaching alpha and synchronizing your brain into alpha requires a great deal of practice, and we had done years of TM practice. Then I had my participants who had been practicing autogenic training for a much shorter time, much for period of time to see what autogenic did. Like autogenic was one of the last techniques I included in my study. So this is someone with eyes closed. As you can see, mostly alpha in the background, in the back of the brain, and theta waves in the frontal. This one has a lot more theta. This is somebody's falling asleep, basically, on their left hemisphere. And then I asked this patient to start practicing the autogenic phrases, the autogenic technique that I taught this person. And what we saw was this. Now, synchronizing your brain within the alpha band is difficult, but not as difficult as the autogenic state. So my contribution to the field was that autogenic state is unique. It is not a form of meditation, and it's literally moving towards sleep. It's a very specific state in which you see changes in cardiovascular activity, musculoskeletal activity, etc. So there's a lot of research supporting that. I like to wrap things up by just showing you an application of this technique, autogenic technique. In this case, I'm talking about a woman who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, having horrific nightmares. You might have come across some of these patients. Please ask the question, do you have frequent nightmares? That can be extremely helpful as far as your prognostic, the prognosis of certain cases are concerned. People usually don't talk about them, but nightmares, especially persistent nightmares, can interfere with all sorts of treatments. So this is a woman who was in a car accident, was having frequent nightmares, in incredible intensity, and very, very frightening. And she was placed on medication. She was turning into a zombie, but from all these medications she was on. But without the medication, she also was moving toward almost a psychotic state. I'm just gonna jump through this. So I used an ABA design, and this is a measure of the severity of the nightmare. So the nightmares, when I collected data in the initial part of the first couple of weeks, they were incredibly severe while I was doing all kinds of other tests. We introduced autogenic training. Autogenic training is based on 6 exercises. Anyone can learn, very simple. I'll demonstrate in just a moment for you. The severity of the nightmares dropped significantly. Then there's an advanced technique called autogenic abreaction, which I used. And at the follow-up, 6 months follow-up, the nightmares have disappeared. My study was replicated. And if you're interested in a copy of the study, please let me know. Delighted to send it to you. We also look at the frequency of the nightmares. Again, note they were almost every night. And then we use autogenic neutralization to affect the nightmares. Please let me know if you're interested in the study. I think reading it would be thoughtful about it. So if you don't mind, and please, I'm going to make it incredibly brief, but please stay with me and just listen to my. I'm just going to demonstrate a simple part of the autogenic training. So if you'd like to close your eyes, that's fine, and just get yourself comfortable. And I'm going to ask you to simply repeat a phrase that I'm going to say to you in just a moment. And what I'd like you to do is to just repeat the phrase and pay attention to your arm. Do not try to make anything happen. I want you to simply repeat the phrase. So I want you to simply repeat to yourself. This is one of the first sensations you experience as you're about to fall asleep. I will not let you to fall asleep. You have to ask questions. I want you to repeat to yourself. You simply repeat to yourself, my right arm is heavy. My right arm is heavy. Think of a soothing sensation of heaviness. the muscles of your right arm. My right arm is heavy. Don't try to make your arm heavy. Simply repeat the phrase. My right arm is heavy. My right arm is heavy. Just imagine your arm is becoming so relaxed, so heavy, so free of tension, that it actually feels heavy. My right arm is heavy. Now, please take a deep breath in, deep breath in. As you breathe out, stretch out both arms and both legs. And do the second time. Take a deep breath in. As you breathe out, stretch out both arms and both legs. So that was a very brief demonstration of one phrase of the first autogenic exercise. There are 6 exercises. We move from heaviness to, we add warmth, we add cardiac activity, breathing, etc. So systematically go through those exercises. If you have people working in your practice, or psychologists, nurses, etc., who would like to learn this technique and use this technique, I wrote my book was written in a way that it would be also almost like a manual as well. The middle part is very much like a step-by-step approach. But you need to read the whole thing and understand what the process is all about. The message, I hope you found this fascinating. I hope you think of yourself as fascinating. I hope you appreciate how amazing it is that your thoughts and your body work together to promote repair, to promote an autogenic state. I hope you appreciate how important is your work when you help your patients sleep better, whatever interventions you use. And I hope you continue to take these courses and these and other courses and learn about yourself and life, and pay attention to how incredibly complex life is. These are the words of one of my great teachers, Seneca, who says, for life spent viewing all the variety, just when you think about it, there's so much variety in life. The majesty, the sublimity in things around us can never succumb to ennui. You don't want a life that becomes listless and full of dissatisfaction and boring. Just look at the incredible variety that exists all around us. Sometimes we are exposed to this variety through the courses we take and new knowledge we gain. I hope you learned some new things tonight, and I hope I didn't go over time. I do want at one point to do another lecture on this and actually take you through each of those 6 exercises. I'll be delighted to do that. Looking forward to it. So I'm done. Thank you so much for listening, and I want to hear some questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sadigh. Again, another riveting lecture. You spoke nonstop, so I think you should step away and wet your whistle and get that right arm a little looser. Get it a little looser. We're going to have a few minutes of business and come back and say 5 or so, and we'll present the questions. But thank you again very much for that. You've expanded our horizons every time we listen to you, because we scientists get down in the mouth, so to speak, and it's very technical, and chronic pain and sleep disorders, you have to be able to step back and look at the person as a whole, which
Beautiful.
I force myself to do. And these kinds of things are things you don't learn in dental school. You don't read them in textbooks. And it's not only helpful for us as professionals, but in our own life experiences. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that message to us back to Canada. We're going to make you an honorary Canadian, I think.
Yeah, I would love to.
So take a break. Take a break, and I'll watch for you coming back. But take your time. We've got a few things to do first, and then we'll start getting questions coming in. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So folks, welcome back. Some of you missed our opening comments. You didn't miss much, but essentially what I was saying is we're now returning to our regular Academy-sponsored webinars. We had the months of September and October. We were part of a mini-series where we joined other groups in Canada and the United States to broaden our horizons, to expose us to other speakers, and to invite those folks to join us. So this is more of a familiar format with a single speaker. Typically, we ask for questions to be sent to me through the chat box, so you can start doing that now. And I'm going to introduce the lady who runs the show for us, not just for me, Bianca Calla, who's our Director of Communications, who might speak very briefly about our social media ads, and we'll launch the polling questions. Tonight we have 5 questions, so she'll launch that momentarily. And I just want to remind folks that the next webinar, 2 weeks from tonight, is another very special event. It's called our Members Connection webinar. We are not presenting a speaker. We're actually opening up the night for all of you to be present with us. I'll have the full advisory board with us, so you can ask them questions of their particular specialty. But we want to hear from you. Are we on the right path? Where do we go from here? Nobody saw 2 years ago that we wouldn't be having in-person meetings for some time. We clearly have to address that going forward. So 2 weeks from tonight, you'll be getting lots of advance notice, but come prepared with all kinds of suggestions and questions, and I'll have the full board along with Bianca here 2 weeks from tonight. So Bianca, if you just want to maybe say a few words, and if you want to just talk about social media ads and then launch the polling questions. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, David. Welcome back, everyone. We have been advertising more on social media. You might have seen it on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So I encourage you all to continue to, well, not on our ads, but on our posts, to continue to like and share and interact with them. When you share it in your own networks, it builds our network as well, and it expands our reach within the community and broader as well. I think that's all I really need to say about the ads, David, but I guess, yeah, just keep an eye out. If you have any ideas, please bring them to the member webinar next week. If you can't make it, you can always email myself or David with topics, speakers, or particular resources that you'd like us to include on the website for yourself or for your practice too. For the polls, I'm just going to put it back on your screen. You're probably familiar with it. You can just click any of the answers, all of the answers, hopefully. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to launch it right here.
Okay.
Should be on your screens now. It's just helpful for us planning in the future when we do these polls, and it's also great for the participation for when we do any of the certificates too.
Great. Thank you, Bianca. Somehow I feel like the PBS channel in Erie, where they play music for an hour and then come on and coax you to support the channel by sending money in. I'm only coaxing our members to connect with us, to tell us how we're doing. What more do you want us to do? How can we improve? We think we have one of the best presence online, thanks in large part to what Bianca's been able to do. She also researches the field and has been quite impressed, I think, with the content we've been able to put on our website. And so as a leader, we want to continue to be leading the pack, not following it. So it's all about your ideas. It's all about what you need to hear. So for sure, fill out the questions and make sure you come next week and tell your friends about it. I think our guest speaker is back. He seems to be rested. So question number 1. Is the book available in another language, i.e. French, or possibly on Audible? Is the book available in French or Audible?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. And if you don't mind, I have a request actually. It's not in French. Most of the autogenic literature is actually in German. And I spend both for Alvi's edition worked very hard to go to the original sources to write the book. Totally unrelated, but please bear with me, related. I wrote this was my other book called Existential Journey about Viktor Frankl and Leo Tolstoy. Came out a number of years ago and 5 years ago. And Mrs. Frankl actually invited me to go to Austria and to Vienna and give a lecture about it. About a year ago, totally unexpected, I received an email from a publisher in Poland. And the publisher said to me, your existential journey is becoming very popular in this part of the world, and we're interested in translating it into Polish. And would you be interested? And I said, I'll be honored. That's usually, well, it makes you feel good that your work being published to another language. And just a couple months ago, here's the Polish translation of it. I don't know if you know Polish, but so now it's in a Polish language. I don't know Polish, but it's very special. So if I may, if you know of a publisher who would be interested in translating autogenic training to, I know people are reading it all over the place. I get questions from all parts of the world. If you're interested, if you know of a publisher, if you're interested in translating it, please let me know. I can get my publisher to work with you. And I own the copyright. So as far as I'm concerned, that will not be an issue whatsoever, which is what I said to the Polish publisher. So I'm not interested in royalties or anything of that sort. What makes it meaningful to me is that somebody else is reading the work and benefiting from it. Autogenic training, when you follow the book and different chapters of it, it teaches you about different ways of initiating this mechanism, which is medically based, came out of hardcore science, the only technique that I know, the only technique that came out of physiology. So you could have many benefits. So if you'd like to reach out to a French publisher, they can contact me. I will. I need to let my publisher know about it, but I don't think they'll have any problems with it. But as far as I'm concerned, they can have the rights to it and they can translate it into French, the beautiful, beautiful French, and make it available to people.